Hello, this is Paul Reese, and welcome to the Healing Podcast. I'm with Dr. Tim Teel, but let me read you his intro. It's amazing. You can call me Tim, Dr. Tim, pretty much whatever makes you comfortable. I ditched medicine and don't really want to be associated with them. Who I am and what I do is no longer aligned with medicine as I was taught it. The world needs something better, something honest, something genuine. I no longer believe medicine represents that. I'm a physician, and what I believe is a reflection of the oath I took and what a healer is supposed to be. That is a powerful statement in today's world, and I've talked to you about 30 minutes on the phone, and I was very intrigued by our conversation. And you have been exploring the subject of emotions and healing, and you are formerly a doctor, and so I kind of want to just give you the reins because our conversation before, when you took the reins, I just wanted to listen. So kind of give you a little bit of your history. And then also if you could touch on that story that you shared with me about the gentleman who kind of put you on a new path whenever he had the throat cancer. That'd be amazing.
Sure. No, thanks, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity to share this story because it really is something very unique and something very interesting. But my name is Dr. Tim Teel. I was a board-certified ear, nose, and throat physician. I joined medicine in 2003 and took myself out of medicine in 2023 for entirely different reasons. I joined medicine to try and solve problems, and I had a very unique set of circumstances that brought me to medicine. So I know I was supposed to be there. Unquestionably, I was. There were doors that opened for me that never should have, and yet they did. And I went through medicine. I did my surgical residency in Chicago. I did trauma time at Cook County Hospital in downtown Chicago. I did my head and neck training, ear, nose, and throat head and neck training at Sloan Kettering in New York City, and I graduated my residency program and started practice in Oklahoma. And I really had a lot of frustration throughout my career, and I half of the new patients that came to see me all had the same complaint. They had a tickle in their throat that wouldn't go away, a cough that they couldn't get rid of, some hoarseness that would come and go, and they were all scared to death that they had a cancer diagnosis. And I was taught to treat those patients as reflux patients. And when I did, about 30% of them got better, and 70% of them didn't. And this was quite a frustration for me and and for my patients as well. And what I learned throughout the process, I despite my training, I retained my curiosity, which is a really dangerous thing for a physician to do. If you step out of line, it's really not very welcome. But doggone it, people were coming to me for solutions, and I wasn't able to provide them the solutions that my training taught me to provide these people. It just wasn't working. And so I stepped out of the medical literature. I got on some message boards and other things, and people started saying that they were having some success by treating that particular problem as a food sensitivity, and there were some common foods that were causing the problems. Dairy products were very, very common. Soda pop, peanuts, cashews, or all kinds of things that were irritating people's throats. And when I brought this to their attention and said, maybe we should just try some of these things, just take some of these things out of your diet and see what happens. And many of them resisted. Many of them said, I've been doing that all my life and it never bothered me. And I said,
Right.
Until now, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long you been 60 years old? Just this year, right? Yeah.
Right.
What's your point?
Yeah. And real quick, you shared with me the percentage of people that would come to you that you would be able to help, and then the percentage that you wouldn't. Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah, about half and half. I might as well ask people to change their religion as to change their diet. I mean, no,
It's a big thing.
It is. It's a big thing, and more importantly, it's an emotional thing. There are many people that eat out of emotion, but every decision that we make is an emotional decision. If you separate the part of you that decides emotionally, you can't even make a decision. And so, about half of the people that I asked them to change their diet actually did, and the ones that did had dramatic results. And then I'd say, now go back to your regular diet and see what happens. And they did, and they were, oh, well, it's just food. So about half of those went back to their regular eating habits, because they weigh in the decision and see, if I like this food but it causes this problem, I'll live with the problem. Hey, you know what? It's a free country. Go do what you want to do. And the half of the people that did what I asked them to do and they stayed the course, they started seeing some other things happen. Their weight would come down, their joints would stop hurting, their blood pressure came down, their autoimmune disease got easier to treat, and all of a sudden my practice started to spin into the dirt. What's going on? I at the time, I mean, and this happened to me 2 or 3 times, but I'm a little bit not so bright when it comes to, I thought I was here just to solve problems, right?
Right.
No, that's not the way the game's played, dummy. We treat things. We don't fix things. Nobody ever explained that to me in 20 years of medicine. I had to figure that one out on my own. In fact, the story that absolutely ended my career in medicine was for 2 years I've been asking the other docs in the group where I was practicing, I can see in the medical record that you're sending your ENT referrals out somewhere else. I said, I'm the only ENT in the group. And I said, and my outcomes are fantastic, and my patients are really happy, and they just kind of didn't want to talk about it. And finally, the guy that managed the practice one day came down to my office and said, listen, you've been asking for a couple of years, why the other docs in the group aren't sending you their business anymore. And he said, you're a nice guy. He said, you're a good doc, so I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. Thanks. I've only been asking for 2 years. I thought I deserved that answer 2 years ago. He said, listen, you're doing a really good job down here in the clinic. He said, you're fixing problems that everybody else is being paid to manage. And he said, that's why they're not going to send you their business anymore. I said, I'm definitely in the wrong business. And that moment, in that conversation, I turned around and I pulled my medical license off the wall, and I said, I think I'm in the wrong business. In fact, I know I'm in the wrong business. And I sent Texas license number S4404 back to the state of Texas. Anybody can look me up. I am a real guy and a real dude, and that was a clean license. It was pristine. There were no lawsuits, there were no complaints, and there were no investigations on it. But in all good conscience, there was no way that I was going to continue to practice medicine withholding the information that my patients were asking me to provide them, and give them treatment instead, because it was a better cash flow model for the people that who work in cash flow medicine. And cash flow medicine isn't what I signed up for. I'm just foolish enough to think that I was there to fix problems and use my curiosity as a tool to help find people the solutions that they were looking for. And that was in 2023. And I don't regret a day pulling that license off the wall and sending it back to the state of Texas. I signed up to fix problems in medicine, and I thought that's what my job was. And that's not what your job is in medicine. It's to manage problems because it's a better cash flow system. So
yeah, that's incredibly brave and honestly rare. I've been friends with many doctors, and I believe that almost every doctor I've ever known has a correct intention, and some of them even see through the system in the same way that you do. But to actually make that decision when you've invested so much of your time and energy and reputation, education, it's like it's a hard decision to make, especially if you have family and you have bills, and it's like you're getting paid.
Well,
with all due
respect, all the bills and everything else. If I have to sell my soul and what's right in order to pay my bills, I'm in the wrong business. I can't do that. No, if anybody else wants to do it, by all means, go ahead and do it. And I don't throw everybody under the bus and toss them into the fire and say, no, these people are evil. They're not. They have the best of intentions. But what they don't realize is that they're operating inside of a system that no, that is not geared toward providing solutions. It's a better cash flow system if we treat the problem and manage the problem. In fact, the guy that explained all this to me, his eyes literally rolled back in his head, and he's like, the guy that was here before you, he was a genius. He set up all of these things to treat dizzy patients. And he said, Teel, you just don't get it. You just fix them and send them out the door.
Yeah.
I thought that was my job.
That's the whole agenda.
Yeah, really. I mean, people keep being born. They continue to get old, and they continue to have problems. Isn't that not a good enough cash flow system? And he said, no. Okay, I'm in the wrong place, man. I'll figure something else out. And and I went on down the road. I said, this is not, in all good conscience, I'm accountable for the things that I do and say and how I operate in this life. And I actually believe that, that's true. And I'm not about to take people's money and provide them half of what it was that they came to me for. At some stage in the ball game, the lid's going to come off, and everybody's going to figure out that that's what medicine's been doing. And I don't want to be in that crowd. No, I am not doing it. I'll go work at Walmart or do something else, but my conscience will not allow me to do such things. I mean, I'm sorry, but it isn't going to happen. And one of the things that has come out of that is I've actually been physically threatened. My family has been threatened, and we've subsequently left the United States. I mean, I'm talking to you from sunny Central America for good reason. I am not gonna continue to live under that kind of nonsense. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's how organized crime works, and sorry, not gonna do it. And there's more and more people in medicine that have figured this out, and oddly enough, they all do the same thing. They wind up leaving the country in order to keep themselves and their families safe. And I'm not alone in what I've done and how I believe that I ought to be conducting my life, and what you have to do in order to stay safe and keep your family safe. You have to leave the country. That's all there is to it.
Well, it's I'm honored that you're sharing this, and whenever I was in the health industry, everything you're saying is what I told clients for many, many years on just about medicine and about natural foods and thoughts, emotions, exercise, fresh air, grounding, all the things that I taught people for years. And so I'm actually really curious. You discovered something around emotions and their role in manifesting disease and creating disease, enabling it. And I'd love to explore that.
Thank you. No, because I didn't want to talk about everything else anymore. I'm I'm done with that. Let's talk about something fun. This is hands down the most exciting thing that I've learned in 20 years of medicine. And this is why I was supposed to be there. Okay. In 2020, I had this old man. He was 80 or 81 years old when I met him. He waltzed into my office having the same complaint that everybody else had. And I got a cough that won't go away. Feel like I got something stuck in my throat. I'm afraid my cancer's back. And I said, excuse me? He said, yeah, I'm afraid my cancer's back. I said, what kind of cancer did you have? And he said, I had esophageal cancer. I'm like, when? He says, which time? I said, wait a minute. You had it more than once? He said, yeah, they cut it out of me and it came right back a couple of months later. I said, well, it has a bad tendency to do that. I said, are you in hospice? And he says, no. I'm confused. I said, when was this? He said, 35 years ago. Whew. And I said, come again, Chief?
Yeah.
He said, you heard me. I said, I looked at him and I said, you realize you've been dead for like 34 years, right? He laughed. He said, I don't look bad for a corpse, do I? I said, no. I said, you don't smell bad either. I know. I've worked around plenty of dead people in my life. And I said, they all stink. I said, you don't. I said, I'm confused. I said, average lifespan of somebody with recurrent esophageal cancer is 10.8 months. I said, you're not in hospice and you standing here 35 years after you. I said, you did something, didn't you? And he said, yeah, I did. I said, what did you do? And he looked me square in the face and he said, "Do you realize you're the only physician in 35 years that ever asked me that?" He said, "Everybody else just took credit for curing my cancer." And I said, "Well, that's kind of what we do. But with all due respect, sir, I understand the statistics that are associated with your diagnosis. And with all due respect, you didn't just beat 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 standard deviations. You beat like 20 standard deviations, or maybe 40." I said, "That's not a statistical deal, okay? And this isn't say recurrent esophageal cancer. There isn't anybody on the planet, and I'll go toe to toe with anybody who wants to say, oh, it was the chemotherapy that said no, it wasn't. It wasn't radiation. It wasn't chemotherapy. It wasn't surgery." I said, "I want to know what you did," and he told me the story. I said, "Lay it on me, Chief. I'm all ears." I said, "I got to hear this one." He said, "Well," he said, "I made a decision." I said, "What was the decision?" He said, "I decided not to fight cancer." And I said, "Everybody fights cancer." And he said, "I know. I think they're all wrong." And I said, "Why?" And he pointed at the door and he said, "Imagine something for me." And I said, "Okay, what?" He said, a guy walks through that door and you decide you're going to have a fight with him." I said, "Okay. What am I supposed to imagine?" He said, "Just answer me one question." He said, "Did the guy, in your imagination, the second you decide to have a fight with him," he said, "did he get bigger or did he get smaller?" And I closed my eyes and I thought about it and I said, "I think it gets bigger." He said, "That's the conclusion that I came to." He said, "I didn't want my cancer to get bigger, so I decided not to fight it." Counterintuitive. I like it, just for the sake that it's counterintuitive, and I'm a bit of a fish that swims upstream. Yeah. And I said, "Is that all you did?" And he said, "No." I said, "Okay, what else did you do? I'll play."
Yeah.
He said, "I made another decision." And I said, "What was it?" He said, when they cut out the cancer and it came back a couple of months later, he said, they told me what the odds of survival were, and I knew I was toast. And so he said, I just decided to accept the fact that it was going to take my life, that it was going to make a widow out of my wife, orphans out of my kids, and take me away from the work that I really enjoyed. And so I looked at him and I said, "So you gave up?" He said, "I didn't give up. I didn't say when." I said, right. Fair enough. But he said something really strange happened the second that I made the decision to accept the fact that it was going to kill me. And I said, "What?" He said, "There was a sense of peace that came over me that I cannot understand. I cannot explain. I cannot quantify it." But he said, "It's been here for 35 years. I said, another counterintuitive decision. I like it. Right. Is that all you did?" And he said, "No." I feel like I'm milking a cow here, man. Right. He said, "Just tell me the story." And he said, "Well, I don't tell a lot of people about the other things that I did." I said, "Why not?" He said, "I don't want them to think I was weird." I said, "What do you care if people think you're weird?" He said, "I was a pastor for 40 years. He said, what people think matters." I said, "Fair enough. Yep. What'd you do?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I sat down in a chair 2 or 3 or 4 times a day whenever I'd think about it." He said, "I'd close my eyes and I imagined sending that cancer love." I said, "You did what?" He said, "You heard me." He said, I said, "Is that all you did?" He said, "Every day for 35 years. He said, "I still do it today." Wow. And I was like, this is the craziest story I've ever heard in my entire life. But you know what, Paul? No, I spent 20 years in medicine to be able to meet that man and let him tell me that story. Because it happened right at the beginning of COVID. And shortly after that, shortly after he told me that story, and everything shut down. And you and I both know the world was going to come to an end, where everybody was going to die, and that's all there was to it. And I found myself on some, again, being the curious fool that I am, I found myself on several different webinars and stuff that people were talking about anxiety and depression and all the rest of the stuff. I'm like, I need to be on that. So I wound up on a webinar where they were talking about emotional freedom technique tapping, and I participated in a tapping session, and that's really weird. I feel better. That's strange. Yeah. And so I started reading more about this, and I I said, wow, this is crazy. And if people aren't familiar with EFT, it's a combination of cognitive behavioral therapy and Chinese medicine. And essentially what we're doing is just tapping on different parts of our body. It's kind of like hitting the pause button on your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes emotion. And the procedure is very simple. While we tap on different parts of our head, neck, arms, chest, and so forth, we quantify or we verbalize as specifically as we possibly can an unwanted emotional condition, situation, as much as we can, and say, despite that, I'm okay. Despite that, I love and accept myself. Stupid, simple procedure. But it is amazing how fast we can shift emotional gears here by using that. And I had a crazy experience with EFT. It's probably a different story for a different day. But long story short, I started taking this back into my clinic and started seeing amazing results with common everyday stuff like people who can't swallow pills. Do you have any idea how many people out there can't swallow pills because they've had some ugly emotional experience with somebody trying to shove pills down their throat or whatever when they were kids? And it's as common as dirt. I come across this couple 2 or 3 times a week, and we would use the EFT technique and and take 2 minutes and we would reprogram these people's inability to take a pill. We just do the little procedure in a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. I give them an aspirin or ibuprofen to take and say, go ahead and give it a shot and see if this works. And they take the pill and they're like, what the heck? This is crazy. It was that fast. And it was permanent. And
really? That was going to be my question.
Permanent. Once people realize that that they have a choice in their emotional response, here's the seminal realization, discovery, whatever you want to call it, that I had. This is why I spent 20 years in medicine, and it's just one single idea. The primary language of the human species is emotion, and it is a programmed language. Laughing, crying, anger, hatred, jealousy, anxiety. It doesn't matter what language you speak. Everybody in the human species speaks emotion. Okay? It's the very first thing that a baby does when they're born. What do? They cry, right? Mm-hmm. Who taught the baby how to cry? And why do they cry? How did they know how to do that?
It's innate.
It is. It's innate. Where does innate live? I mean, we're a piece of meat, right? Everything that operates in here has got a reason, cause and effect, right? Who taught the baby how to cry? And the answer is nobody taught the baby how to cry. Well, how did the baby know how to cry? It's a freaking program. Okay, if this, then that. Think about it from the baby's perspective. He's floating around for 9 months in his mother's belly. He doesn't even know he's separate from his mother. He can hear her heartbeat. He can hear her breathe. He can hear her talk. He can hear her pass gas because his right ear is up against her colon for 9 months, right? He doesn't know that he's separate from his mother, okay? And then one day he wakes up, somebody's squeezing the daylights out of his head. Then in the next second, they're shining a bright light in his eyes. He's cold, but worse off, he can't hear his mother farting.
Right.
So what does he do? What does a baby do? He cries. Who taught the baby how to cry? And why did he cry? Why did he cry? Because he was afraid. Think about it from his perspective. He didn't even know he was separate from his mother, and then one day he can't hear her. What does that mean? Crank the clock back 100,000 years, okay? People were still walking the planet then. What would it mean to a caveman baby if he was separated from his mother? It means he's going to die, right? Yep. How did he know how to do that? It's a program. It's nothing but a program. Where do you think the program lives? Here's what nobody wants you to know. Where do you think the program lives? How can we pass information from one generation to another? How do you think we could do that? How do we pass information from one generation to another? We speak it, we hear it, we pass it down in DNA. All right? Wouldn't it be useful if I was walking along in the forest and I hear in the weeds, okay? And I need to have my spear back and be ready to fight the saber-toothed tiger that jumps out of the woods, right? But what if I don't live long enough to get that information to the next generation? What if I get eaten by the tiger when my kid is 2? Wouldn't it be useful if we could somehow pass that information along from one generation to the next, written in DNA, that says if this, then that? I don't know why, but when I heard in the grass, I just automatically instinctively raise my arm and my spear and get ready to fight. That would be a fantastic survival mechanism, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It'd be great. Guess what? That's exactly how it works, and now we have the proof. I never told you about this, but in 2015 there was a researcher in Canada. Maybe did we talk about this? I don't remember. Her name was Rachel Yehuda. You can look her up. Yehuda. I don't know whether she's still around or not, but in 2015 she published a study where they were taking a look at the children of Holocaust survivors. These were baby boomers in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they were these kids were the children of these Holocaust survivors were seeking psychiatric help for anxiety and depression at 300% the rate of the rest of the population, 3 times. Okay, and they couldn't figure it out. They talked to these people. They couldn't figure out any triggers, any of the rest of the stuff. What did this lady do? Ingenious and in unbelievably cool timing, she takes DNA samples from the Holocaust survivors and from their children. Okay, guess what she finds? She finds long strings of methylated DNA at the exact same location on the exact same gene that you didn't see in the rest of the population. Okay, you didn't see this in the controls. And she was like, it must be some, HPA axis cortisol pathway that we just don't know anything about. Yeah, maybe. But what if? Wouldn't it be useful if this generation of people saw their friends, neighbors, relatives, all the rest of that being rounded up, shot, taken away in trains, hijacked, kidnapped, all the rest of this stuff, beaten? Wouldn't it be useful if they saw these people in brown shirts and little swastikas and German shepherds on short leashes and tall black boots and 9mm Lugers on their side? Wouldn't it be useful if the next generation of people, when they saw that, they wouldn't know why, but they would be ready to fight, hide, run away, or scream for help if they saw these things? Wouldn't that be useful? Yeah, makes you kind of go, Well, here's something else that'll make you go, Well documented that if you die in a car wreck, we take your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidneys, or not brain, but liver, kidney, skin, bones, any parts and pieces that we can harvest and put into somebody else.
Right.
Guess what they start to experience?
The emotions and memories of the people they came from.
All the things that Paul liked. They start liking Cheetos and cheap movies and bad beer and all the rest of the things that Paul likes or doesn't like. Okay, well documented that organ recipients experience personality changes, likes and dislikes. They start having memories of things that they've never experienced before. Well, now you know why. It's just like a SIM card. We're taking it out of me and putting it into you, and merging that with all the information that lives inside of you. Well, here's the most dangerous piece of information that you're gonna put out in your podcast for a long time. If long-term memory is stored in DNA, if an emotional program is stored in DNA, who's in control of your DNA? You are. You are. And you can make it change. And now we're sitting here with these RNA vaccines, and they're wanting to mess with my DNA. Kind of makes you think twice about whether we ought to be doing that or not, doesn't it? And I'm not saying one thing good, bad, or indifferent about those RNAs. I'd kind of like to go on living for a little while. I don't want to come home to my house being on fire and me and everybody else in it. All right? Serious deal. Okay, that's why I got the heck out of the United States. And it may sound as insane as you want. That's how we attack people with new information. We've always locked them up and beaten them up. Okay, and killed them. We've done it for centuries in medicine. Okay, you can go back to Semmelweis, the guy that. No, do you know who Semmelweis is? You heard of this guy?
No.
So Ignaz Semmelweis was he was a gynecologist, OBGYN in Vienna, Austria in the 1850s. Okay, he noticed something. He noticed that there was a bunch of doctors that would swap off delivering babies in a maternity ward with a bunch of midwives. Okay. And the midwives, a bunch of ladies, would wash their hands between baby deliveries.
I have heard of him, yeah.
Yeah. And Semmelweis noticed that the ladies who were being delivered by the midwives, they had their death rate from sepsis was like 0.5%, and the doctors that were delivering babies, their people were dying at about 15%. Okay, of sepsis. I mean, ladies were doing better giving birth on the street than they were going into the hospitals. They were dying of sepsis because the doctors were coming from across the streets. They would do their autopsies early in the morning, and so they'd come in having operated on these dead bodies. Bodies had been dead for somewhere between a day and a week. And they didn't bother washing their hands. They just wipe them on a rag and go over and deliver babies. And they couldn't figure out why in the world all their patients were dying of sepsis at the rate of like 1 in every 8, 1 in 7 that would die. And he said, I don't know what's going on here, but these girls they're losing their patients at about 0.5%. Like 30 times better than us. Maybe we should wash our hands. Okay, what they do with him? They made fun of him. Okay, they drug him. They drug him out in the street and beat him up. And he kept coming back and saying, "Maybe we should wash our hands." Hey, let's. He washed his hands, and sure enough, his sepsis rate went way down. It was amazing. They kicked him out. They fired him. He wouldn't shut up. So eventually, they tossed him in an insane asylum, beat him to death, and he died of the same septic disease that he was trying to prevent. Ironically enough. Okay, this is how we do it in medicine. Okay. Today, I didn't get beat up. I did get threatened, okay? But we do kick them out and starve them out. Anybody who's got any new ideas that diverge from this is by God the way we've always done it. We can do better. We can do better. So anyway, here's what I learned. All right, this is what you want to know about emotions. What I learned after I had my experiences, like, oh, we can change the emotional program. And so I started doing it in my practice, and started learning more and more and more things about human emotions. Well, then I realized it struck me after a while. I'm like, holy cow, this is a language. I was like, that's a language. And people, how'd you figure out it was a language? Because I was a journalism guy before I went to medicine. I was a broadcast journalism major. The guy who was my advisor in college took me aside one day and he said, "Tim," he said, "we got a problem." I said, "What?" He said, "You're in a broadcast journalism program." And I said, "Yeah, I know." But he said, "You got a face for radio and a voice that sounds like Kermit the Frog." He said, "We don't know what to do." So naturally, I got out of there and went to medical school. So they didn't care what I looked like, and they didn't care. They didn't care I had a rotten voice. Doesn't matter. But here's what I learned in journalism school. There is a way of telling a story that's called the inverted pyramid style of telling a story, where you tell the most important thing first, and less important things to fill in the details of the story. And we did it that way because in the day and time when that storytelling style was developed, we were still selling newspapers, and it was an easy way for your editor to cut your story from the bottom and move it to page 9 and finish the rest of the story. So you got more headline news on the front page, and it was a better way to sell newspapers. It's also a very, very efficient way to communicate. Well, guess what? Your emotions are a language, and they're organized the same way. And what we say first matters most. Okay. Rule number 2, this is not a written language. It is not a spoken language. It is
can I ask you a question really quick? When you say, so what does that look like in real life? Let's say, are you talking about a reaction to an event? Or are you talking about reflection on a past memory? Whenever you're talking about sequencing of these emotions and what you, like, is it your reaction to something happening to you? And then
Well, let's think about it in a big picture. Okay.
Okay.
No. So no. Again, let's start out at 10,000 feet and then kind of work our way down. At
Okay.
10,000 feet, everybody who's listening to your podcast has probably been posed the question in their life: who are you and what are you doing here? Okay.
Right.
And are you a body with a soul, or are you a soul having a human experience? Okay. Now, in our language, it doesn't really matter. We're kind of saying the same thing. But in emotional language, if we say I'm a body with a soul, which one has dominion?
The body.
What I said most important, right?
Right.
Here's rule number 3. We have free will, and we can experience life however we want to. Okay? And if you want to experience your life being a body with a soul, you can do that. Okay? And let me know how it works out for you. Okay? And that's the way most people have been taught to live their life. Okay? But if we say, I am a spirit having a human experience, now what has dominion?
Yeah, spirit.
And we have free will to experience life that way as well, if we choose to. Okay? And so these are some of the rules that I kind of figured out along the way. But most importantly, this is not a written or a spoken language. It is a felt language. Guess where we feel it?
Feel it in our entire bodies.
Exactly. Mostly in the midline of our body. Okay, but but it is a felt language. We feel it in our we feel it in our heart. We feel it in our throat. We feel it in our belly button. We feel it in the base of our pelvis. How about a little pucker action? Okay, just something that makes you frightened, that gives you a little pucker, right? So we feel it in our physical body. It's one of the reasons. Here's yet another rule. Your physical body is here to give you feedback. That's a really important rule. Okay, these physical bodies are a reflection. Case in point, identical twins. Okay, single egg gets fertilized, splits in half, has the exact same DNA in two different cells that grow into a fetus and a baby and a whole human being. When identical twins are little, you can't tell them apart, right? What happens as they grow up? When they grow apart, they leave the house, they go lead different lives. By the time they're 60, 70, 80 years old, they don't even look alike. They don't have the same disease processes. And yet our deterministic model of DNA, well, they have the same DNA, they should express the same. No, they don't. They're having a different emotional experience of life. And that emotional experience is being reflected back on our physical bodies, and you can see it. You can see it every day on identical twins when they're 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. They don't even look alike. They don't have the same disease processes. They are having a different experience of life being reflected back in their body. So here's where the story gets weird, okay? Fast forward 4 years to July of 2024 from when I met this old man and gained this knowledge about emotion and emotional language. So, doom scrolling through Facebook, and I see a friend of mine is in the hospital. Somebody I knew 17 years ago. I actually met her when she was my next door neighbor when I was doing my surgery residency on the south side of Chicago, and she said she was in the hospital with a cancer diagnosis. So I picked up the phone and I called her. I said, "Hey Lou," I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm just laying here in a hospital." I said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, I developed a bowel obstruction," and she said, "Oh, it really hurt, and I was in pretty bad shape. They split me open, and they found the obstruction. It was a 5.5 centimeter tumor in my colon, but it wasn't just in my colon. It had gone through the wall of my large intestine, and it had gone through my abdominal wall. She had a previous mesh surgery that was done for a hernia, and that cancer had grown through that mesh and into the muscle." She had a 3 centimeter hit in her liver. 6 of 13 lymph nodes were positive for cancer, and there was cancer on the edge of the one lymph node, so they'd actually cut through it. So they knew she had still had a significant amount of cancer in her body, and her alk-Phos was up, which typically means that she has metastasis to the bone. But she said, based on the size of the tumor, the extent of the disease, the fact that it's disseminated throughout my body, she said, "I'm stage 4C." And I said, regardless of what they do, I'd probably be dead by Christmas. And I said, "Can I tell you a story?" She said, "I'm laying here in a hospital bed. Go ahead."
Yeah.
So I tell her the story of this old man, and she says, "So what?" I said, well, "What do you mean?
Right.
So what?" She said,
Yeah.
"Tim, I believe in miracles," and she said he experienced a miracle. Okay, so what? I said, "Well, Lou, here's the so what." I said, "Since I met that old man, I learned some things about emotion, and I have this theory that I believe that emotions are the primary language of the human species. In fact, it's the primary language of the entire universe, and I think it has rules, patterns, and characteristics to it. And I think that that perhaps there is a chance that that those emotions are giving a set of instructions to our body that our body understands." And after I told her all this, she says, "So what?" I'm like, "Oh, come on." I said, "Here's the so what, Lou." Okay, and you'll have to excuse my language, but it drives the point home. I said, I've known you for 17 years, and you are the angriest bitch I've ever met in my life. In my life. She says, "Yes, so what?" I said, "You're a tough case." I said, I think that there is a chance that that anger that you have carried your entire life is being reflected back in your body." And she finally stopped, and she said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to try the boldest, craziest experiment ever." She said, "What?" I said, I said, "Go let your doctors do whatever they're going to do. They want to do all kinds of crazy stuff to to give her 2 or 3 more days to live." And I said, "I want to try something totally nuts." And she said, "What?" I said, "I want to call you every week, and I want to give you some homework to do." And she said, "I got nothing to lose. Why not?" And so I said, "Okay, here's the first thing I want you to do." I said, "I want you to make a list while you're laying there in that hospital bed. I want you to make a list of all the people that have ever done you wrong in your life. Put their name and what they did on that list." And she said, "That's going to be a long list, Tim." I said, "Just stick to the top 10, shall we?" She said, "Okay." So she comes back in a week, and she has this list of all these people and everything that they did. And I said, "Wow, that's a heavy duty list, and I get it now." And I said, "I totally get it." She said, "What do we do now?" And I said, "Burn it." She said, "Do what?" I said, "I want you to take the list and burn it. And I want you to see the flames. I want you to smell the smoke. And I want you to pay attention, because I don't care what you say. I don't care what you write down. What I want you to do is I want you to come back and tell me what it felt like when you did that." Okay, because this language, if I'm right, this isn't written, it's not spoken, it's felt language. And I said, "I just want you to tell me, what does it feel like to burn the list?" And she did. She came back and she has this little grin on her face, and I said, "How was it?" She said, "It felt good." I said, "Interesting." She said, "What are we going to do this week?" And I said, "Take the same list, rewrite it again." "Okay." And I said, "Don't forgive them." She said, "No problem." I want you to take that same list. I want you to go down it one at a time. I want you to just imagine, what would it feel like if you forgave those people. Don't do it. Just imagine what it would feel like to do that. She said, "Okay." She did it. She came back with a bigger smile on her face. I said, "How'd it feel?" She said, "It felt awesome." I said, "Really?" She said, "What are we going to do next?" I said, "This week, I want you to take that same list." And I said, "I want you to go down one by one and forgive those people." I said, No. Stop.
Red button. Let's push
Red
it.
button. Oh, gosh. I mean, just shoo it through the roof.
Yeah.
And I said, "Listen," I said, "it's not written, it's not spoken, it's a felt language." I said, "What did it feel like when you used your imagination to try and forgive these people?" She said, "It felt good." I said, "What do you think that means?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "Let me explain it to you." I said, "Forgiveness isn't for you. Okay, forgiveness isn't endorsing what these people did. It's not saying it was okay. It's simply giving up your right to be angry about it, right?" Okay. She said, "I know that." I said, "You know it here, but you got to feel it here." And I said, no, all these stupid little projects that I'm having you do is to help you feel what it feels like while you stay in a safe place and hold on to that anger that you're so accustomed to. She said, you're darn right.
Right.
Give it a shot. See how it works. I swear to you, Paul, she came back the next week and she was glowing. And for the very first time in her life, she cried in front of somebody that wasn't her own kid.
Wow.
And she said, I don't know what the world you're doing here, but something shifted. And in that moment, and I've got the labs to prove it, her cancer started to respond. I'm like, oh my, we have done something huge here. So, and here's how we know it. There's GI cancers are famous for producing what's called carcinoembryonic antigen. It's a little blood protein that these GI tumors will produce. The more they produce, the higher the numbers are. The worse your diagnosis and your outcome likely is. And if what we do it causes that CEA number to come down, it's an excellent marker for prognosis of the disease. So her CEA numbers were 54 nanograms per milliliter when we started this process. Now, that doesn't sound very high for somebody with stage 4 disease, and it's not. But they didn't know they were doing a cancer diagnosis when they went in and opened her up. And so they didn't draw the CEA until after the big part of the tumor was already out. And so 54 with her, given the stage of where she was at with treatment and so forth, was a very, very high number. That was in July, or actually in July of 2024. Okay, in August they drew it again. We started working with one another at the beginning of August, and at the end of August, her CEA number was 21, and in September it was 12, and in October it was 6, in November it was 3.1, and normal is 3. And by December,
was she doing anything else during this time? Was she continuing her regular doctor visits?
Yeah, she was. And they were giving her palliative chemotherapy. It doesn't work, and they all know it. But you can't not do anything.
Right.
And it doesn't fit the cash flow model not to do anything. So of course we have to do something. Okay. But interestingly enough, during the time that she was receiving chemo, now mind you, she lost a significant amount of her colon. They diverted her colon through her abdominal wall. And around that stoma, she developed a big wound, and so they had to stop the chemotherapy for about 8 weeks. And during that time, her CEA continued to come down twice. It continued to be cut in half during that period of time when she was off chemo and had no other therapy going on at all. Well, by January, her CEA number was undetectable, and her doctors were kind of scratching their head, going, "What the world is going on?" So they do a CT scan of her entire body, and the only anomaly that they could come up with was that 3 centimeter hit in her liver was now 6 millimeters worth of hypodense tissue in there, which usually means like scar tissue or something. It could be anything. But it went from 3 centimeters to 6 millimeters. And I'm like, Lou, everything else that we've worked on, you turned loose, you had a different emotional response to it. And I said, who are you still mad at? And her eyes just popped open and she said, Georgia. I said, who the hell is Georgia? She said, it's this lady that I used to work for. She was mean. She cut me out and she blacklisted me. And she starts to get all. I said, okay.
There we go.
Here we go. And so we went to work on Georgia, and she was able to transmute that emotional energy. And in that period of time,
what was the methodology for transmuting the emotional energy? Was that EFT or?
Honestly, everything that we were doing was all conscious work, Paul. Here, I have to explain this, okay?
Yeah.
The difference between positive and negative emotion is where the locus of emotional power is in that felt emotion. Okay, you understand that single I spent 20 years grinding away in medicine for that single piece of information. Here's why that piece of information matters. Okay, because now we're putting taxonomic labels on something we've never been able to weigh or measure. It's one of the biggest problems we have in medicine is if we can't weigh it and we can't measure it, it's not really real. And to all those people who think that way, I asked them, what's the volume of a thought and how much does love weigh? Okay? And if we can't weigh those things and measure those things, and obviously they're not real because you haven't put a hell of a lot of thought into developing whatever theory of you're treating a human being, for crying out loud. We're not a piece of meat. We're a piece of meat that is animated by spiritual, energetic, and emotional energy. Okay, and if we don't treat people like human beings, a complete human being, we're only treating that tiny little piece of meat that we understand. And when we start treating the whole human being as a spiritual, energetic, emotional being that's inhabiting a piece of meat, it changes the picture altogether. Okay, and if we understand this single concept of the difference between positive and negative emotion, it not only has the opportunity to transform how we practice medicine. This idea will transform our entire civilization. Because let me ask you 3 questions.
Yep.
Have you ever experienced negative emotion?
Yep.
Yes. Fear, anger, hatred, sadness, anxiety, whatever. Question number 2, did you ever wake up today or any other day of your life and say, I want to experience negative emotion?
No.
Fear, anger, hatred, sadness, anxiety, regret. No. If every human being is experiencing negative emotion and we don't choose to experience negative emotion, why are we experiencing negative emotion?
It's usually in a reaction to external stimulus.
That's exactly right. It's a program. If this, then this. And I discovered this in 2017 and 2018. My wife and I were violently attacked in our home 5 times. 5 times. No joke. Horrible story. I made it end with overwhelming violence. However, between episode 4 and 5, my wife and I were talking about it one day in our home, and as we were talking about what had happened, I was angry. I was overwhelmingly angry about being attacked in my own home as is a reasonable response. But here's what was really interesting. My wife was sitting there, tears running down her face. She wasn't angry. She was sad. And I thought, that's really weird. We were elbow to elbow experiencing the exact same information. You're sad and I'm angry. It's like we got a different program. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what's going on. Okay. Now, where'd that program come from? It came from your folks. Okay. You inherited part of that program from your mom, part of it from your dad, and you wrote part of it before the age of 7 years old. Okay. And everything that you experienced and survived, it went into the survivability file. Okay, we were building our program from before the age of 7 years old, and everything that you experience and you survive it, it's survivable. Okay, a reasonable conclusion, right? So we've all seen women who've been involved in one bad relationship after another, where they get beat up, they get out of that relationship, they get into another one, they get beat up again, they get out of that relationship. What's the next one going to look like? The same thing. Why? Why do these women do this? And it's because somewhere deep down inside their psyche, they experienced abuse before the age of 7 years old, and they survived it. And they see every single one of these new relationships not as this is the guy of my dreams, but they say, I can survive this. And so they're getting a green light from inside saying, yeah, it's good, you can survive that. Are you crazy? No, they're not crazy. It's just a program. Okay, and what has to happen to these people before they change the program? They wind up in the ICU. Somebody beats their kid. Whatever. They have a near-death experience, and they say, "Oh, something's really got to change here." And then they go ahead and change the program. But you ask the question, how do you do this? How do we do this? Well, first of all, we just realize the difference between positive and negative emotion. Nobody wants to experience negative emotion. So why do we experience negative emotion? Well, if the power is outside of you, we're projecting our emotional power outside of us. The general characteristics of negative emotion has a tendency to be chaotic, destructive, and dispersive emotional energy, which is really useful if you need to fight, hide, run away, or scream for help. It's a survival level response. But here's where the story gets weird. Okay, I was a surgical resident, and my job in surgery when I was training was to take cancer samples from the OR down to the pathology lab down the hall and look at these things under a double-headed microscope with a pathologist And guess what cancer looks like under a microscope? It's chaotic, it's destructive, and it's dispersive. It's a biological match to the characteristics of negative emotional energy. I'm like, this is crazy. It's not crazy. Okay, it's these physical bodies are a reflection of what our predominant emotional program is. Guess what positive emotion is? If negative emotion, if the locus of emotional power is outside of us, the locus of emotional power with positive emotion is inside. Okay, it's organized, it is concentrated, and it is creative emotional energy. Guess what healthy tissue looks like under a microscope? Cells are small, they're concentrated, they're organized. You see repeating patterns of cell types, and they're creative. They are dividing at a controlled rate, not a chaotic, destructive, and dispersive rate. Okay. Mm-hmm. This is where it gets weird, and this is how I came up with this theory of maybe our emotions are giving our body a set of instructions in a language that it understands, and in fact, this is exactly what happens. Okay, and this is a repeatable experiment. I've done it multiple times in my own house. When my now 11-year-old, a few years ago, he came to me, Dad. He says he's had a thumb that was just covered in warts, and he said, "Can we do something about this?" I said, "Bud," I said, "if I go to whittling on those warts," I said, "you won't even have a thumb left." I said, "How about if we just take that thumb off right there?" And I said, "You just count to 4 on that hand." He said, "You got anything else?" And I said, "Yeah." Right. Yeah, I said, let's try this little experiment. I said, "I want you 2 or 3 or 4 times a day." I said, "Just stick that thumb out here, and I want you to just take your other hand out here and smile. Close your eyes and smile and say, 'I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you.' And I create healthy skin right here. I create healthy skin." And this kid went to doing it. For 2 weeks, he, whenever he think about it, you see him over in the corner doing this. I'm like, I know what he's doing. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks. Later, we're out on the Jersey Shore. We try and get out there and see friends, and he's splashing around the waves. He comes running up to me. He says, Dad, he says, "Look at this." And that thumb, those warts are hanging off of his thumb. I mean, they're falling off. 2 weeks. I'm like, right on. That's cool. 2 months later, his little brother comes to me and he says, "Dad," he's got this ginormous wart on the back of his hand. It's like the size of a 50-cent piece. It's just huge. Look like warts on top of warts. And my now 11-year-old was standing there and he said, "Come here, Jack." He said, "Dad, I got this." Takes his little brother. I think he was like 5 or 6 at the time, and he takes him over in the corner and he says, "Jack," he said, "I want you to just start tapping on your hand 2 or 3 times a day, and he say, 'I love you, I love you, I love you,' and right here I create healthy skin." And he's like, Jack's like, hey, he's little. He said, "Are you for sure?" And he said, "Yeah, just give it a shot." He said, "Keep Dad from cutting on your hand." Oh, he goes to banging away 2 weeks to the day. That stupid wart falls off. I'm like, okay, this is a little crazy, but it's cool. Now we have a replicatable experiment, and in the meanwhile, okay, since 2024, I've continued to talk to Lou, okay, our cancer patient. She's still around. Okay, I still talk to her every week. Okay, we could put her on your podcast, and she could tell you what it is that we've done, and she will tell you. I recognized that emotions were a language, and I know how to manipulate that language. And I ask myself the question every time that I stop, whenever I get into a situation where I'm feeling bad, and I ask the question, "Where's the power?" And unquestionably, it's outside. And second question, where do you want it? I want it inside. And the third question is, how do we get it there? In the same way that old man did it. Okay. What did he do? Number one, he recognized the difference between positive and negative emotion. Intuitively, he understood that anything that he was fighting, okay, let's look at the word fight. Okay, what does it imply in emotional language? Is anything positive, or is it? Yeah, it's chaotic, destructive, and dispersive. That's the general characteristics of negative emotion. So if I decide I'm going to fight something, I'm actually feeding it chaotic, destructive, and dispersive emotional energy. Do you think that's the right thing to do with a biological process that's already chaotic, destructive, and dispersive? No, you're just fanning the flames of it. So fighting cancer is the dumbest thing that we ever did once you understand emotional language, okay? And so we're not going to fight. we're going to move the locus of emotional power inside. How did that old man do it? Step 2, he accepted things exactly as they are. Where's the locus of emotional power with acceptance?
Mm-hmm.
It's inside. Not only that, but if I have the choice to decide what my emotional response is going to be, now where's the locus of emotional power? Inside again. Boom. 2 ways we just move that locus of emotional power inside. And in so doing, we now have a positive emotional response to the most horrible things that you can dream up. Now we know how to make it a positive emotional experience just by simply accepting things exactly as they are. We're not saying, oh, this is great. I love this. Oh, this is wonderful. No. We simply say, I accept this exactly as it is. Okay? Step number 1, move that locus of emotional power inside and see what it feels like. And once you feel that you can move that locus of emotional power inside, now where's the power? We just fan the flames of that locus of emotional power getting bigger. Now, what else can we do? We take all those negative emotional experiences. Lou, in her particular instance, she had an abusive husband, and I said, Lou, what if this life that we're living isn't really what it appears to be? I said, what if this is just like a giant batting cage? She said, what? What are you talking about? I said, just imagine for a second, okay? You're in a batting cage and you don't know you're in a batting cage, and the lights are out, and a batting machine and that pitching machine is running. I said, what's going to happen? She said, I'm going to get hit with a ball. I said, what if your husband, who beat the tar out of you repeatedly, was just the guy in the behind the cage turning on the pitching machine, and it's just hitting you, and you get hit with a ball. Ow! Dang it! I didn't like. Ow! Dang it! I got hit again. Ow! Duh! What's your emotional response going to be? It's going to be negative. I don't like this. Where's the locus of emotional power? Outside. What's the general character of that emotional power? It's chaotic, destructive, and dispersive. Is that what you want? No, I don't like it, but I don't like getting hit. I said, what if you turned the light switch on? What if you didn't even know you were sitting in the dark, and somebody says, why don't you turn on a light switch? And you say, what's a light switch? You start feeling around, you think, boing. I'm in a cage. And there's balls coming at me, and they keep hitting me. I said, now that you've got the light switch on, what do you have? I don't know. More information, I guess. I said, now you have a choice. I said, now that you see the balls coming at you, what do you think you should do? Get out of the way, of course. Okay? Mm-hmm. Just get out of the way. That's what acceptance is. Okay? We're just simply getting out of the way. I said, do you know what else you could do? She's like, I don't know. I get out. I said, you're in a batting cage, for crying out loud. What do you think is in there? A bat? I said, yeah. What do you think you could do with that? Mm-hmm. I guess I could pick it up and hit the balls. And I said, maybe you could make that energy go the other way. And I said, that's exactly what we do when we forgive these ugly things, terrible things. And I said, then we choose what our emotional response is. We're not endorsing I don't think it's okay to cut the heads off of babies and eat them. No, of course not. But if somebody cut the head off my baby and ate it, I do have the right to forgive that horrible set of circumstances. Now I transmuted that energy, right? I understood it, and at a much higher level, once you get involved in this work and you start moving that emotional power around, then all of a sudden you start to realize, wait a minute, if I hadn't had that cancer diagnosis, then I never would have figured out that that I could move that locus of emotional power. I'd never known that I had a choice in my emotional response. I never would have found out that wait a minute, I gave myself this cancer by feeding my body chaotic, destructive, and dispersive emotional energy over and over and over again for years, and by removing that signal and replacing it with, I love you. I am in awe at the incredible nature of this human body, my human experience. I can change it. I have a choice, and I can express whether or not I express the program that I was born with, or whether I rewrite the program and give my body a different set of instructions. And I said, sweetheart, you just made history.
Hmm.
You just made history. And every day that you live and breathe, you continue to make history every day. And she does, and she's not alone. And we've done this over and over and over again. And I'm not the only guy who ever figured this out. There's other people out on the planet who have figured this out, and they've all been shut down, every last one of them. Okay? It's Paul, we're in a war, okay? And you know this. I'm not saying anything new, but I'm going to tell you, we are in a war and have been for hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of years. However, now we know. Now we have the living, walking, talking proof. I have radiographic proof. I have chemistry proof. I don't know what else everybody needs. Okay, but we know that we can give these bodies a different set of instructions, and they respond. That's it. You have a choice, and you're in control of your own dadgum DNA. You're in control of how it's expressed. Is this easy? No. You're talking about going up against a human survival program that has served humanity for 500,000 years, 500 million years, who knows? However long we've been walking around, but humanity has survived using this program because it works. Okay, and it's we're now at a point in human evolution where we're starting to figure out not only do we have a choice, but we can give it a new set of instructions. We can change the program, and have a different outcome, totally different outcome. Yeah, that's right. It's crazy.
It is crazy. Whenever we talked on the phone last time, I said what I'd like to kind of talk about is something I've observed throughout my life. And I was raised without television. I grew up reading books and playing sports and being outside, and amazing parents. And, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a TV, and, I have a phone now. And so just when I look at the news on TV, if that's what you, get your source of information from, or your phones, to me, it's a form of sorcery in today's world, where you are constantly being fed experiences that you're not directly experiencing, and then you're supposed to have a spiritual and emotional experience from that. And so exactly right. I'm supposed to watch a war and have anger towards the war. I'm supposed to watch a tsunami and have sadness for the tsunami. I'm supposed to, there's these things that are constantly fed to us, and all it does is it basically forces you to have an emotional and spiritual response. And, I think I'm aware enough to just observe it and just be like, okay, that's information. But for most people, they're so caught up in having that what they're viewing being a catalyst for their emotional state, that it's super destructive, and it's a constant, cortisol depletion, depression, right. All of it. So
it's an energy harvesting war. Okay. And it's been going on forever. All right. No, and now you understand why. Okay. Think about this. All right, if we're being you saw the Matrix movie, right? Mm-hmm. That wasn't a movie. It was a documentary. Okay, and
in the Matrix.
Yeah, we all live in it. We are living in the Matrix, and here's how it works. When you understand the difference between negative and positive emotion, okay, emotional energy is real. We all feel it. Okay, we can't quantify it, we can't measure it, we can't weigh it, but we can all feel it. We know it's there. And if you understand that with all negative emotion, the locus of emotional power is out here. We're projecting emotional, chaotic, destructive, and dispersive emotional energy every time we feel anger, hatred, sadness, anxiety, fear, whatever, okay? And that energy feeds the system, feeds the matrix, all right? If we choose... If we exercise our right to choose, would you ever choose to express negative emotion?
No.
You already answered that.
Right.
No, we don't ever want to experience negative emotion because it's really unpleasant, but we do it because it's a program, okay? And it is a survival-based program that has served humanity for 500 million years or whatever. And it works, okay? But it only serves us at this level. And every attempt to get your emotional power to go outside of you and experience fear, anger, hatred, sadness, anxiety, regret, that energy is being harvested by whoever with your attention. Okay? What's the next thing that these people do? They throw an ad up in front of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are the commodity. Okay?
Yep.
Your attention, your emotion, and your emotional energy is the product, is the commodity that's being harvested. And when we learn to retain our emotional energy, our creative, concentrated, and energetic energy,
Mm-hmm.
the whole world changes. And all of a sudden we stop feeding the matrix, and the matrix just disappears because we stop feeding it. Okay, and the physical manifestation of anything that is chaotic, destructive, and dispersive, which is disease. Period. We have control over. Okay, it's not easy, and that's why that's why all the people in Western medicine say, "Oh, that's just a bunch of woo-woo garbage because it can't be weighed and can't be measured." Oh, nonsense! Hush, hush. If it can't be weighed and can't be measured, then what's the volume of a thought and how much does love weigh? And that's the question that we all need to start asking everybody. Yeah. And if the volume of a thought it can't be measured and love can't be measured, then if none of that's real, then what's the point? Okay. Now, right. Of course, thoughts are real. Of course, love is real. In fact, I had a big cowboy in my office one day. He said, "I know exactly how much love weighs." And I said, "You do?" He did. He said, he turned and popped his wife on a knee and said 238 pounds just this morning. He limped out of my office, but I understood what he said. But right. But the point is real. We need to be asking these questions instead of just accepting what it is that we're being fed. What is the volume of a thought and how much does love weigh? These are the two questions that we must ask everybody that says, "Oh, if I can't weigh it and can't measure it, it's not real." Oh, hush. It is the same people that have been telling us that 97% of the most powerful biochemical information storage system in the known universe is junk for 75 years. You've only known about DNA for 75 years, and all of a sudden you know with absolute certainty that 97.5% of it is junk. Oh, my gosh. The only thing more ridiculous and more academically dishonest is denying the very truth that's staring you in the face. Shame on you. And that's why I don't want to have any part of it. Say, listen, I earn my right to be called doctor, and I earn my right to walk with that silly white coat on, and I also earn the right to lay it down, and say, listen, the world deserves something better than this. This is absolute nonsense. And when we fail to recognize that the food we eat and the thoughts that we think are way more powerful than the needles, knives, and pills that we've been told to shove down everybody's throat, you're insane. I'm sorry. That's just that is the a diagnosis of a cult, for crying out loud. It's cult thinking. And I actually had the audacity to call the cult out, and the cult said, "See ya, bye. You can go starve to death, sit in a corner and starve to death." I'm like, "That's okay. I'm good with that. But I'm not going to sell my soul for this. This is nonsense."
I'd like to ask you a couple of just direct questions. One would be if someone embraces this transmuting of emotions and emotional sequencing and realizing they have sovereignty over their own thoughts and feelings and emotions, and then they are continuing to do, let's say chemotherapy. Would their body recognize that as two different signals, or could they be synergistic in taking on the cancer, or does the body recognize the chemo as a chaotic energy trying to kill it and thus gets bigger, in your opinion?
Well, when we created the automobile, we didn't kill all the horses. Okay. We still have, people still ride horses, and we enjoy riding horses, and we do it for a number of reasons. There are some places that are only available to get to via horseback. And where I live, there's horses all around. There's people that use those horses for recreation, for transportation, and all the rest of that stuff. But there was a better idea that came along. It's called the automobile, and you can get inside and you don't get wet when it rains, and you get away from the heat and the cold, and it's much, much faster, and it's a much more effective way to get from where you are to where you want to be. And so we didn't kill all the horses just because we had an automobile. And I'm not saying that that we should kill all the chemotherapy and the surgery and all the rest of that stuff. There's a number of surgeries that are absolutely curative of cancer when we remove all of that cancerous tissue. So it would be foolish to say, oh, we should never do that, or we should never, radiation therapy. We know exactly how it works, and it works by killing cells that are in a specific part of their cell cycle. And when they're the more rapidly dividing cells are in that particular part of their cell cycle, they will die with radiation therapy. But it only works Monday through Friday, and anybody in medicine gets that as a joke. But so should we throw any of that stuff out? No, absolutely not, because it helps, and it also buys us time. Okay, what I'm an advocate for is extremely difficult. Difficult. In fact, I don't even like working with stage 1, 2, or 3 cancer patients, because they don't have an existential crisis that's big enough for them to do the unbelievably courageous thing that to even consider changing this emotional program that has served me well for X number of years. Okay, it helped me survive. I know it helped you survive. It's also killing you. Okay, so no, we shouldn't throw out chemotherapy and radiation and surgery and all the rest of that stuff any more than we should throw out the most powerful method of dealing with disease, and that's taking over the control system and communicating to that body in a language that it understands. That's not. We're doing the same thing, 150 years later, for the same reasons, because we discount any new ideas that ever come along, and that's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. There's all kinds of diseases that Western medicine has made a dent in. Okay, cancer ain't one of them. All right, we have cancer cure rates are just as dismal today as they were 100 years ago, and yet what's really funny is when I met this guy in 2020 and told this story, I would tell this to other physician colleagues of mine, and they would laugh, and they would shake their head, and they would say, "It's always the same guy." And I said, "What do you mean it's always the same guy?" I said, "Tim, you've been around medicine, you've been around cancer patients long enough. Any oncologist will tell you, they can tell you in the first 10 minutes of working with a patient who's going to have a good outcome and who's not. Okay, because attitude makes a difference." But I said, "No, we've all seen these people. We've all heard these stories. We can all tell you a list of patients who have outcomes just exactly like this guy." What do you mean? They said they're always happy, they're optimistic, and they believe that they can control the outcome of their disease. And those are the people who have these kind of outcomes. I'm like, why are we not studying this? And the answer is always the same. It's because there's no money in it. I'm like,
yeah. All right. Another direct. We have time for a couple more direct questions.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm a Christian, and from my worldview, things that I've experienced with people is that sometimes, like you're saying, when someone has, they reside in that state of anger, like they're just angry people. I think a temporary, expression of emotion is a natural part of the human experience. But when someone is constantly angry or constantly depressed, or I believe there can be a spiritual root to that. And I think through prayer that can be eliminated and removed, and they can restructure their thought process, their understanding of the experience that happened with. And just in my life, I've seen that happen with people that I've prayed with and talked with. If you run into someone with your technique, with the emotional freedom, that has something that is a permanent emotional state that they seem to be residing in, does it work the same way as someone who, say, just had a trauma that they held on to that is kind of underlying versus like an emotional state that they are constantly operating from?
Yeah, let me answer that with a story. So
okay.
in 20, I don't know, 2022, 2021, something like that. I had a young lady. She was 30-ish years old, and she came in with. I'm gonna try and mimic the sound that she was making. I'm going to cough when I do it because it's unbelievably horrible. It sounded like this. She was standing at my front desk, and this is what it sounded like when she was breathing. Oh my! I knew immediately what was going on. Okay, no, she was experiencing what we call paradoxic vocal fold motion. Okay, your vocal folds, your voice box. They're a set of chords. If you look down somebody's throat, they look like this. And when we breathe, when we inhale, they're supposed to go apart. And when we exhale, we control how fast we exhale by controlling the valve. Okay, right here. If we put it together, we slow down how fast we breathe out. When we talk, we actually push those vocal folds together. And as we blow air through them, those vocal folds vibrate. They make a sound that sounds like this, ah. Okay, and we modify that with our lips, teeth, and our tongue. Okay, that's how we make sounds. That's how we modify the sound that we make down here with the rest of our voice. Anyway, when she was taking a breath in, her vocal folds were supposed to do this. But instead, they were doing this, okay, and making this horrible noise. She was now sucking air through those vocal folds going down, and she was making this sort of sound. It was awful. God, it sounded like somebody was choking. And so I'm like, because we know, textbook, that is a psychiatric diagnosis. It's an emotional problem, usually associated with some form of trauma. And so I get her back in. I talked to her, and I said, when did this start? And she told me the exact day that it started. And I said, on that day, did you get choked? And this was her response.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. And I said, so we tried a little EFT, and that would work for about 30 seconds. And I would tell her jokes and get her to laugh, and that would work for about 30 seconds. I tried to hypnotize this girl. I tried talking her through it, to let her know what was going on. And everything I did, I would get like 30 seconds worth of improvement, and then boom, she was right back at it. And I'm like, I'm pulling every stupid, crazy trick I've got out, from tapping to hypnosis to all this, just crazy, every trick. She came to see me 2 or 3 times and finally just gave up. And after I hung up my license, I got a handwritten note at my house from this lady, and she said, I wanted to let you know that even though you and I weren't successful at solving the problem, you told me what was going on, and I went and started working with my pastor, and I worked for 6 solid months trying to forgive that man for what he did. And the moment that I decided to forgive him for what he did, the problem went away, Doc, in that moment.
Yeah.
And she said, I just wanted to tell you thank you. Even though you didn't solve the problem, you taught me that I had to. And the second that I made that decision, the problem went away.
That's powerful.
That story broke me in half. But the point is, listen, it took her. Listen to the story. It took her a solid 9 months to a year. It must have been in 2022 because I got that letter in 2023. Anyway, it took her a solid 9 months of working with 2 different professionals to try and figure out that she had a choice and how she responded to that situation emotionally, and the second that she made a decision to change the program changed. We have the power. That power rests inside of every single one of us. And look at everything that Jesus taught. Everything that he taught was all about one thing. It was about emotions. He taught about love. He taught about hatred. He taught about forgiveness. He taught about all these things. And everybody that he healed, what did he tell him? He said he said it wasn't because of me. It was because of your faith.
Yeah, your faith has made you
that
whole.
healed you. Exactly. Your faith has made you whole. And he was telling the truth the whole way along. He just, I, 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 I kind of have this crazy thought. I mean, what if Jesus told everybody, well, actually, it's an emotional program. It's written in the deoxyribonucleic acid that you inherit from your mom and your dad, and you wrote the whole thing before the age of 7 years old. Like, they'd have cut his tongue out and hung him out to dry like that fast. The guy had to talk to people in a language that they understood. Now we understand this language. Okay. Now we understand that that the energetic language that he was talking about, not only is it real, but it's manipulatable. Okay, which he taught that too. All right. But now we know why, and now we know the mechanism, and now we've all been intellectualized. That we've all been programmed that everything's about this. No, it's not. It's all about this. Okay, you got to move that. No, you got to move the power from here to here. This is where the real power is, and this is what everybody in education and government and banking and nobody wants you to know that the power's in you. But you got to know and realize that the power is in you, and that there is a language that governs that operating system. So if you want to mess with the operating system, you got to understand the language. If you want to understand the language, you got to understand the rules, patterns, and characteristics of what that language is, how it operates. Understand the difference between negative and positive emotion, and start moving that locus of emotional power inside. Crazy,
Yeah.
but powerful. It works.
Yeah.
I've seen an awful lot of ugly things in the last 10 years. And this ain't it. Okay. This keeps me excited. Thank you, Paul, for the opportunity to talk about this and to continue to tell the story. This changes civilization. This is what causes the second coming to occur. The second coming happens in here. This is where Christ comes through us. It's here. And when we learn to speak that language, the very language that animates every single person on the planet, then we change our entire civilization. We change the world.
Nice. I love it. I truly appreciate your time today, and I'm going to be reflecting on it a lot. I may text you some questions and thoughts, but my whole intention with this podcast is to explore the subject of healing through as many lenses as possible. And what you've shared today is a very valuable lens, and I'm grateful for it.
Thanks.
And I just hope and pray that everyone listening to this, if they can apply these things, that will help them heal. Do you have, is there a way that people can get a hold of you, or if they want to work with you or learn more?
Yeah, we've been shut down on pretty much every social media platform that you can dream up, and a few that people have never heard of. However, there is one out there that supports what it is that we do. It's called 5dhealerverse.com. It's 5D HEALERVERSE.com. And you'll find a lot of woo-woo people out there, but I'm going to tell you the woo is true, okay? And everybody that works on that social media platform does exactly what it is I'm talking about. They just got their own take on it, but everybody who's working there is helping people emotionally move the locus of emotional power inside. And so if you go to 5dhealerverse.com, you'll find a whole bunch of people on there that do similar work. But I'm on there, Dr. Tim Teel, and TEEL. And you can direct message me there, become friends, become a part of that community, and take whatever serves you, and turn everything else loose. But that's where you can find me. But it's tough to find. Again, we're in a war, okay? And if people knew that they were in a spiritual war, they would act appropriately. If you never tell people that they're in a spiritual war, but you've declared a spiritual warfare on them, then who's got the advantage? It's the people who declared the war, all right? And it's our job as human beings. This is part of the game. We're here playing a game. This is a giant video game, and if you want to learn how to win the game, then you got to learn how to control emotional energy. We we're here to do. And when you can learn to control that emotional energy, then you're starting to win the game, and we change the game altogether. And when we stop allowing ourselves to be harvested, that emotional energy that we're hanging out here is being harvested. That's what feeds the matrix. Starve this freaking matrix. Okay, leave the power inside, and take a message, take a hint from what's going on out here, guys. We're hidden, we're hard to find, because We have the power to change the world. You have the power to change the world. It's not me. Okay, I just teach this stuff. All right, no, but I can't. I can't make somebody change their mind. I can't make somebody change their emotional program. I can teach them how. I can teach them why. I can do the what's with you, but you got to do the work. And once people figure out that that they have a choice and that they can move that locus of emotional power inside, then the whole world changes, and it can change fast, and I mean fast. But you just got to know that you're powerful, and that you're here for a reason, and that you were deeply loved by the God that created you and gave you the opportunity to come here and play the hardest game in the universe. But we are winning. And everybody who listens, and everybody who tries, and everybody who practices, and everybody who starts moving the locus of emotional power inside, you will feel it in your life. You will see it reflected. People will start treating you differently. And all of a sudden, the world that you're operating in changes. And that's how we change the world. That's how we change the world. Thanks, Paul.
Tim, have a wonderful day. If you'll just leave your tab open for a minute or two, it's close to already uploading. So appreciate your time, sir, and hopefully you get to meet in person one day. I'd love to come and see you.
I'd love to do that. Thanks, Paul.